The reality we live in can be a very strange place. Most of the time, fact being stranger than fiction. How will we ever start to understand this reality we live in unless we question everything? Join me and a guest as we unravel the mysteries of this reality, one topic at a time. This is Inquiries of Reality with Shayn Jones.
What is up, Inquirers, and welcome to the expanse of deep open-minded conversation. I'm the one they call Shane, and today for you guys, we're diving back into the UFO topic, but from a little bit different of a perspective than what a lot of ufologists dive into. And today's guests have been previous guests on the show, but they got some new stuff they've been working on, and a lot of new stuff that they want to be able to share with you guys. And of course, we dive into a lot of the philosophical stuff related to the UFO topic, but I definitely think you guys are going to enjoy this episode if you guys like reaching into a different way of thinking about the alien phenomenon. But before we get into this one today, just a couple quick things. I am still trying to put together an investigation team for Michigan/Metro Detroit area. You don't necessarily have to be in that area, but if you're willing to make the trip at least once a month, be able to do some investigations, you're definitely somebody that I would be looking for the team. And for this team, I don't just want to dive into cryptids. I don't just want to dive into the paranormal. I don't just even want to dive into UFOs. I want to dive into all weird phenomenon as a whole, because all of it is obviously connected the more you start diving into this. So I'm definitely looking for diversity as far as this team goes. So if it sounds like something you might be interested in, there is a Google form available down in the show description that you guys can fill out. And of course, in a couple weeks, once I get a couple more of those banked up, I will start getting back to some of you guys and figuring all that stuff out. And the other thing I'd like to bring up is that I'm still trying to expand topics to introduce into the show. So if you're somebody that has something that hasn't been talked about on the show that you'd love to be able to present to the show, don't forget to get a hold of me. I don't care if it's conspiratorial. I don't care if it's spiritual. I don't care if it's cryptids, aliens, whatever. If you have some type of open-minded fringe topic and it, again, has never been talked about on the show, shoot me a message because I would absolutely love to be able to have you on. That said, before we get into the show, just a quick message. This podcast has a strong focus on community engagement, so I encourage all listeners to share their own experiences and research on the show. That said, if anyone would like to be a guest on the show, or if you have an encounter or experience that you'd like to share on the show or possibly have me investigate, you guys can email me at inquiriesofrealitypodcast@outlook.com, or you guys can get a hold of me through the hotline. You guys can text, call, or leave a voicemail over there, and that number is 313-364-1551. And every single thing that I mention is all available in the link tree, which is available down in the show description. And with that, let's get into the show. Please welcome back to the show for now their second return, Leslie and Stephen Shaw. How's it going today, guys?
Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for having us.
Absolute pleasure to have you guys back on the show. I think the last time you guys were on was episode 208, if anybody wants to go and check that out. But make sure I tell everybody when I have a previous guest on to go and check out the previous episode. But last time, we started diving into like some of your experiences, what kind of led you guys into writing your books. But I know that this time, you guys have some new stuff you're working on. You guys have a documentary, a show. So I'd love to dive into some of that stuff. And of course, some of your new experiences. But for anybody that possibly missed the last episode, doesn't want to go back and listen. For anybody that may not be familiar with who you guys are, why don't you kind of give them like a brief idea about what you guys do exactly?
Okay. We are the authors of this book, who they are and what they're up to. It's available on Amazon. And it has some of our personal experiences at the beginning to just kind of let people know who we are and where we're coming from. But
why we wrote the book in the first place.
Yeah, but most of the book is about our theories about who is flying the UFOs in our skies and and what their motivations are.
And that was where we had a lot of fun last time, getting into a lot of different theories and stuff, because a lot of your guys' beliefs on it lined up with a lot of chains of research that I've been kind of getting into. So it's always nice to have other people that kind of get to the same conclusions.
Oh, good. I'm so pleased. Yeah. And you know, that Harvard report came out last spring that basically backs up our theories too. It wasn't this college itself, but these Harvard researchers, they did a report with another scientist from a Montana university. I forget which one, but the three of them wrote this report that claims that they think UFOs may be coming from a terrestrial source, like we believe. You know, like it's
like we found to be true.
Yeah,
actually.
that's what we think. So it was nice to have the Harvard people on board. That was cool.
And since the last time we were on, we have done a documentary called Who They Are, which is on YouTube
and Amazon now.
Also now Amazon, people can rent it or they can buy it, of course, you know, but it's still
the high def version of it is
so
costing money.
We had a quarter million views within about 7 days when it came out, and I have actually a story that we'll get into as far as that
how that came about.
How it came about.
Yeah, it was funny. We were in Big Bear, and I had done this show. You know, we live in a really hot climate, and Big Bear is up in the mountains. It's a snow resort in the winter, you know. And I thought we just got to get out of town during the 4th of July. It's just too hot here, you know. So I booked us a room up in Big Bear, and at the same time, I got us a booth at the festival there, you know, so that we could sell our book. And I don't usually sell our book at general admission places, you know. Usually we try and specialize it. It's like a UFO show or something like that, right? But this time we did a general audience, and it was just a complete bust. We had only sold one book all day long, you know. And then this guy walked up to us, and it was actually Steven. He overheard.
I've got the story.
Yeah, you tell it.
So I was talking to another vendor, and this guy had some UFO experiences himself. Okay, and we were kind of talking and whatnot, and we're getting ready to, you know, I was getting ready to pull down the booth because, you know, one book sale for all the work we had to do was like, you know, ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so this guy happened to be walking by, and he was kind of overheard what we were talking about, and you know, I didn't know this guy from Adam, man. He just introduced himself. He said, you know that I am a producer, and I do documentaries, and I'm with Sky Island Storytelling. And I said, okay. He introduced himself as Jeremy, and he said, well, you know, I really like what you're saying, and we've been looking into doing something along the lines of what you guys think. So
yeah, like I wanted to do a UFO.
So I didn't take it too seriously at the time, but he was serious. He wanted to do a documentary.
Yeah.
Apparently, he lived up in Big Bear, and he was willing to drive to, you know, Sky Valley.
So we just serendipity that we met him.
Right.
You know, what I was thinking was like the worst event we'd ever done turned out to be the best thing we'd done.
So what happened was, you know, I do have precog abilities, okay, which I don't
a little, yeah.
I don't try, but I do get precog. So 2 days before this guy showed up at our house, Jeremy, I had this vivid encounter with him at our table, our glass table, where we were sitting down and talking about the interview. And he said that he was going to have to be going to Arizona. He had this need. He had to go to Arizona real fast.
This is in a dream, a precog dream.
Okay, so not really a dream. It's kind of like in between somewhere.
Yeah.
And the other thing he said that he was having a lot of trouble with his left shoulder and his left arm. He had a lot of pain there. So I told Leslie, I said, Leslie, when Jeremy gets here, ask him these 2 questions. Okay, just ask him them. No pushing, no mentalism, nothing like that. Okay. And she asked him the 2 questions, and absolutely he said, yeah, I do have to go to Arizona. Like, you know, like
his next project.
You know, he's being pulled to Arizona. And he was having trouble, a lot of trouble actually, with his left. And he's a right-hander, but he's been like doing too many push-ups apparently. And he got himself into a lot of pain and with his left side.
Yeah.
So it is like, you know, but this is not unusual for me. Okay, it's been happening more recently, more commonly recently, actually.
So the documentary was a huge success, and then that kind of spun off into a show for us, not TV. We're with the Gnostic TV network, and they were on TV for a while, since the word TV, but now they're just streaming. And we signed with them, and we have a new show called Abductions 101: UFOs and the Paranormal Connection. Because we see a big connection between all of it.
Oh yeah, the more you dive into it, the more you realize all of it's connected.
Exactly.
As you know. Yeah.
In fact, we just had an interview with someone the other day who said that either he was a witness to this or one of his guests was, but they saw two Bigfoots standing on a ridge, and above the Bigfoot was a UFO. And the two Bigfoots put up their hands and said, like, made a sound, and then there was a flash, and they were all gone. They all disappeared at the same time.
Where was I with that one?
Yeah, I don't remember that one. Huh? That was, I think it was Rob Kelly with the typical skeptic. I think I'll have to double check that, but I thought it was, what a wonderful connection to the UFO phenomenon. We really think Bigfoot and the UFO phenomenon are quite connected. Because we think, in kind of in a nutshell, that the people flying UFOs in our skies are a breakaway branch of humanity. And we're not the only people to have this theory about them being a breakaway branch of humanity, but we are the only ones, as far as I know, who have equated the separation of mankind to the Great Flood.
Yes,
because the source of the Great Flood myths have been pretty much found. The Younger Dryas comet impact area in Lake Superior has been confirmed and dated to about 12,800 some odd years ago. So, that caused that extinction event of 13,000 years ago, where we lost the mammoth and the mastodon.
Yeah,
has finally been explained.
There are a lot of verifiable facts, science facts, that actually back up what we found, and also helps to back up too what I've experienced throughout my life from about the age of 3. And as your audience may know from a prior conversation we've had, that my family bloodline, spanning 4 generations at least, has had interaction with an entity that is named Oglegli. And Oglegli turns out to actually be not a spirit guide, which I thought for most of my life.
Yeah, the family
but
thought
turns out my brother actually saw Oglegli, what Oglegli looks like, when he was 16 in 1982. A 6.5 foot tall, skinny, gray alien. Okay.
With the big head and the too big of eyes.
My uncle had contact with Oglegli, saved his life in early 1950s Ceylon. My grandmother had contact. My mother did for sure. I did. As you know about the coins being magnetized in my pocket when I was 18 years of age in 1979. So, at a certain point, when I turned about 30, 31, I really said, things aren't adding up for me. So I started doing my own research, way before the internet. I just did a lot of reading and did a lot of research while I was an acupuncturist. I just, was my other thing. I wanted to find out what was happening to me. I had a lot of unexplained things that just did not add up.
And big chunks of missing time, which as soon as we began researching it, we quickly discovered that that's just the signature for the alien abduction phenomenon.
And I'm still having things happen to me today. The one there was the precog thing, but I've had other things too where I had
about the thing where it was zapping your brain.
Oh yeah, this is
very recent.
Maybe 7 months ago or something.
Yeah.
This was as real as it gets. I thought I was in my bed, but I wasn't, okay? And I was like on this table, and there were these tall aliens, gray aliens, that were talking amongst themselves and saying, this guy knows too much. And they literally had my brain on a video screen, and they were doing zap. They were zapping different areas of my brain, and I was actually feeling it. Okay. It wasn't like it was in a dream. It was actually a physical sensation. And I thought, oh my God, you know, and, I still, get out of my body sometimes, astral project. And in fact, not long ago, I had to go to the bathroom and I jumped out of my physical body and I went to the door and I couldn't open it. And I thought, what the heck, And I realized
his body.
I realized I was out of my body. So I turned around and I went back. I looked at myself and said, oh my God. Literally, I thought, did I just die or something? I said, oh no, I'm just out of my body. So what I did, I just laid back down, got in my body, and then I got up to go pee. But
did the sensation go away? Just a weird question. If you're not attached to your physical body, when you got up, like, did it feel like you still had to go to the bathroom, or was it just out of like habit? Like, do you still have that same feeling if you're in your astral self?
I did not. It was the funny thing is because, I'm a 245-pound guy, right? So I don't just jump out of the bed, right? But in this case, it was like I weighed nothing. And I just walked over to the door and I was pulling on the door and I was in my room. It wasn't like a dream or anything. Like I was in the room and I thought, well, what the heck? I can't open the door. And then I thought, uh-oh, I can't get out of bed that quickly. I turned around and went back to my body.
I ain't even got to go no more.
No, I looked at myself, I'm just right there, And so I said, okay, I got to get back in my body. So I laid back down and then I was able to get up the regular way and go pee. But
hold on tight, everyone. Inquiries of Our Reality will be right back after this brief commercial break. But if you don't mind taking a second to follow Inquiries of Our Reality on Instagram and Facebook and Open Minds Media on YouTube and TikTok, I'd greatly appreciate it. And feel free to spark up a conversation. I love getting to know you guys. And now back to the show.
I've been able to do the astral projection thing, pretty much my whole life.
Yeah, I had to be taught how to do it.
It's not that hard.
He did it very because he studied Tai Chi for so long, and that is Tai Chi is meditation. It's and chakra moving, meditation. So it opens you up just like the practices of Buddhism would, where you're chanting or meditating, and so it came naturally to him. But when we got together, I wanted to learn how to do it. And we took there was an 8-hour class that our, this church kind of thing we belonged to was doing
the Gnostics,
the Gnostic religion. Yeah. And they had an 8-hour class on it. And then that night I went home and I read the chapter 1 out of this book that he had,
The Art of Astral Projection.
Yeah.
It's a great book. It works.
And then I that very night I popped out of my body and I was so surprised that, I was only a few inches from that ceiling, that cottage cheese kind of ceiling.
We had the old cottage cheese ceilings in that.
Yeah. And so I was so surprised. I went, wow. And then it slammed right back into my body so hard. I actually jumped in bed, and it's actually hard to beginners have trouble staying out,
like riding a bike the first time.
Yeah. But after a while, because what you'll do is you'll try and move your arm. Let's say you are astral, and you try and move the arm. It's hard to tell the difference between your physical body and your astral body at first, and so you'll try and move the physical body and then slam back in because
you'll try to move
the physical body.
You have to use mental commands, and where you're going to go. And where you're going to go is like almost always emotionally based. Let's say you say maybe you want to go here, but actually emotionally, what you really want to do is go to Egypt.
Yeah, like you can kind of make a plan that the night before. Let's say, okay, I want to go to this closet and look at some object in it or something. Like, let's say you have a plan, you want to do something when you're astral. But when you get astral, the astral body is more emotional and it does what it wants, it doesn't want to do this, like this chore. Right. And so it's kind of hard to train it to remote view and do what you want it to. But, after a while, you build expertise just doing it, of course.
I guess since you guys brought this up, it might be a good spot to bring up this line of conversation that I've been kind of thinking about lately. So I've been somebody that's been able to astral project most of my life, but have no control over it. It's just, it happens when it's going to happen. And I've never been able to control any aspect of it. And usually when I come back, I'll always have these sleep paralysis experiences. And so when I come back, there's usually these like dark shadows and everything that kind of like linger around, like the typical kind of like shadow people thing. But I always see this really, really tall one that has green eyes when I come back. But I've talked to a bunch of different people on the show that dive into this whole like sleep paralysis, astral projection type experiences, like Vicky Joy Anderson being one of them. And she comes from like the biblical perspective on this type of stuff. But talking to somebody else who runs, I forgot what his name was, Les Velez, who runs like Opus, he was talking about this concept that he thinks that a lot of people that may have had some of these experiences of sleep paralysis, it might actually be a screen memory over like an abduction experience. And that's what, you know, maybe some of like the dark figures and everything standing around is just trying to cover that stuff up. But at least from like your guys' experience, your guys' research, do you kind of like put validity behind any of those types of claims? Because I mean, I definitely find it interesting no matter which perspective you come at. And it seems like when I had my experiences, a lot of them were almost like these like test scenarios where you'd go through like obstacle courses, and usually like water seemed to be a theme with these obstacle courses. Mm-hmm. And when I talked to Vicky Joy, she brings that up, that when she researches this stuff, like a lot of people have these same tropes of experiences. And I know that there's some people that, you know, aliens are demons, demons are aliens. Like it's a mixed perspective on all this type of stuff. But I definitely think it's like, it's all somewhat connected. But at least from your guys' experience, like what's kind of like your guys' opinion with like the whole sleep paralysis, screen memory, astral projection connection?
I'll take this. Okay. I'll take this. Number one, sleep paralysis is different than astral projection. Okay. Let's get that clear. As far as my experiences and what has happened to me, I can state two very clearly. When I was 23, I was still in the military part-time as a reserve, and I loved to sleep on the floor in the house that I was, I was a cabinet maker at the time. And I was 23 and I woke up in, like very early in the morning. It was dark, but there was little light on in the bar area. And I felt like I was not glued to the floor, but I felt like, really hyper relaxed. I could get up if I wanted to, but I was alert and I was aware. I wasn't in any fear. Okay. And I just happened to turn my head and I looked up toward the ceiling, and there was these beams my dad and I had installed years ago. And there was this little being about maybe 1.5 to 2 feet tall that was had this triangular shaped head, these big black eyes, and it was shimmery. And when it noticed that I noticed it floated down, landed on the floor next to my right side. And it said to me specifically, it said, "Do you want me to help you get out of your body?" In a baritone voice.
You wouldn't expect a baritone out of a 2 foot tall little guy.
But there was something inside of me, because of my training, being in the military and Tai Chi and whatnot. I knew that I couldn't show any fear. I felt this little tingle below my belly button, a little tingle of fear. And so I said to it, "You can help me, but you cannot possess me." And why I said that, I don't know. But it was one of these kind of just things that I said, right? And the being grabbed my right arm, went back up into the air, was trying to pull me out, and then let out this like kind of a growl
of frustration.
Right? And then it left. And my dad talked to me in the morning. He said, "Who were you having a conversation with at 5:30 in the morning?" So my dad heard me talking, and he heard another voice. And another thing that happened this was on December 26th, 1982, when I was barely 22. I had been reading a lot of Paramahansa Yogananda's work, and I read his Christmas meditation before I went to sleep. This is at the house in Sonora, California. And I, around about 11:30 at night, and I was sleeping on the floor again, right? So I woke up at 4:44 in the morning. I know because we had a VCR, and I saw the VCR clock, and I'm not a religious person per se, okay? And I was thinking about God's love. And I remember very clearly, also my body felt like it was really super relaxed too, right? I could move if I wanted to, but it was very relaxed. And I remember thinking about God's love. I remember thinking the thought in my heart and feeling it in my head. And the Chinese and the Japanese talk about the Zen state, having one pure thought that is balanced with emotion and intellect. And these two points came together, hit my third eye, and from like a billion miles away, this inverted pyramid of blue-white light hit me like a bullet, came right to me and hit me right in the forehead, and I was encased in this blue-white cocoon of energy. And I thought to myself, this is an ineffable experience. I don't know what to say. Thank you. But it was like I knew at that instant that all the old teachings of the Zen and Tai Chi and all that stuff were real, because I had that experience where I was in the right state, the right alpha state or the delta state, and I was in the right state of mind, in the right state of consciousness. And I said, no wonder the guys sit in diapers for 8 to 10 hours a day in India with these big smiles on their face. And this is what Paramahansa said,
Freezing their nips off.
said that you can experience this. And it was 6 months later that I was going on a job site with my dad, and I was looking through the back of a Psychology Today magazine, and just like paging through it in the back, and there was this, swear to God, for your audience, there was this advertisement where it showed a man who was laying on a stone tablet on his back with this inverted pyramid of multicolored light hitting him in his third eye, and making a cocoon around him, and saying, you can experience enlightenment via the Rosicrucians. And I showed my dad, and my dad knew what I had told him. And he said, oh my God.
Just like that.
Because this is 6 months later. Okay.
But to get back to your, what we were taught as far as in this class for astral projection,
right,
is that whenever you're in that state where you can't move, but you're conscious, you're in this, what's called the hypnagogic state or the hypnopompic state, depending, because you can access it from consciousness down to this middle state, and that's hypnagogic, or you can kind of wake up towards it from sleep, and that's hypnopompic.
Yeah.
And when you find yourself in this where you can't move, you are perceiving into the astral realm. And so that's why people see creatures and people there, or and sometimes scary people. We were taught that sometimes lower vibrational beings do attack people in the astral realm, but way to escape them is that we can ascend to higher planes, but these entities cannot. So that was a way of getting, if you are attacked in the astral realm, just mentally say, I want to go to a higher realm. I want to escape to a humble,
or jump. Yeah.
And the other thing they taught us was that whenever you're dreaming, you are astral already. A dream, when a person's dreaming, their astral body is floating above their physical body in like a dream cocoon. And it's possible to wake up inside the dream, and then you're already astral. And then you can go traveling. So if you find yourself dreaming, and let's say your Aunt Zelda's there, and that's impossible because she's dead or something, right? And you start to realize, hey, I might be in a dream. Just do this thing where you jump. Just make yourself jump, and you'll fly up into the sky if you're dreaming, right?
or dream be gone, or look at your palms.
And then you can tell at that point you can either lucid dream, which is fun too. You can control your dream, or you can say dream be gone. Poof, and it wafts away, and then just like smoke, and you'll be floating in your bedroom above your physical form.
Exactly.
And then you can go where you want.
Yeah, so we differ a bit on the whole thing about the sleep paralysis. I know for myself that for a fact that I could have gotten up if I wanted to in either of those situations. I wasn't in any terror type thing. I wasn't like glued to the floor where I couldn't move. I was certainly conscious. That's for sure.
But when you're in that frozen state, they actually taught us it was a time of power, not vulnerability.
Yeah, it's a time of power.
Because this is when you can make mental commands for your astral body to come up out of your physical body, and then it'll do it.
Right.
Next time you find yourself in that frozen state, seeing weird things, try mentally commanding your astral body to separate from your physical body.
See, whenever I had those experiences, that was always like my confirmation that I had actually like astro traveled. Because if I just like normal dreamed as I felt, like I wouldn't have those like paralysis experiences. But I know a lot of people try to have like a bad, evil kind of connotation on it. But my understanding of it, at least from my experiences, is that I always kind of believed it was like almost like you're downloading back into like your physical body. So it's almost like when you start up a computer and it's like rebooting. It's like your astral self like readjusting, accumulating, whatever that word is, back into your body. Because like I never had like maybe a handful of times I had those high moments of fear, but it wasn't too frequently. It was mainly just like I felt like I couldn't move, and it was just kind of like reassessing itself and like readjusting to being like in this reality. But as far as like lucid dreaming and stuff like that goes, I mean, whenever I would try to have those experiences, lucid dreaming, and I'd become aware, I realized quickly that one of my biggest fears is getting blasted through space at an alarming rate. Because every single time I would try to control the dreams, I would get blasted into these like through space at a fast rate, and then I would just wake up because it would just freak me out so much. But like anytime I had those other experiences though, like I would usually like leave like a light on or something like that. I call it like leaving a light on the back of the house. Like I would turn on like a night light that's like within my line of sight, but when you close your eyes, it's still dark, but you can kind of see it. And that would be how I always become like aware that I was in a dream. But like I said, every time I tried to do it, it would just go into super blast mode, and then I wouldn't be able to, I ended up waking myself up out of it.
I wonder what that is. I mean, we've experienced something we call the astral hurricane.
Well, I've had that many times.
Yeah. You kind of hear it before you feel it. Let's say you're in your astral body and one time it happened to me. I had just woke up out of the dream, and I was floating above myself in bed. And then I heard this sound like a hurricane in the distance. And then this wind grabbed my astral body. And the next thing I knew, I was like 2 miles up in the sky above the house, you know. And with him, it spun you one time inside your physical body. That was weird.
Hold on, guys. We have to take a break to pay some bills. But if you don't like hearing the ads, then I have a solution for you. You can get ad-free and early access to this show and Bizarre Encounters with Shayn Orin on the Open Minds Media Patreon for just $1 a month. It's a great way to support the show and all the hard work behind it. And if you're interested in merch store discounts or video versions of the show, then there are a few other tiers with additional benefits with 7-day free trials available. And we are back, so let's hop right in.
The house that we had up in Yucca Valley, interesting thing about this house that we bought, that apparently there was like some, I won't say satanic stuff, but there are people that were into magic that had owned the house before us, right? And so that was the house where I had a lot more of these experiences where I had the knocking, the 3 knockings behind my head on the wall, just as I'm trying to get to sleep, the bang, 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 or like a door being slammed, like the door in our room was being slammed, or a plate glass window was being broken. Leslie and I both also heard frequently, we'd hear like somebody putting down a glass on the glass table in the living room. But,
you know, a glass being set on glass makes a very distinctive, kind of clunk, clunk sound, but the thing that I had, the astral hurricane, would usually come out of my right side of my neck, where I'd feel like my astral body was being pulled out of the right side of my neck, and then I would be inside literally like a tornado. It was even worse than a hurricane. It was like I was being flapped around. My astral body was being flapped around. And I felt like, oh my God, what's happening, And it was really it was a very, very physical experience. It was, I thought it was fun, but he found it frightening.
No, I did not find that part fun, no, at all.
So, I guess kind of connecting in with some of the extraterrestrial stuff. I can't even necessarily, call them extraterrestrials, depending on like the theory that you're kind of viewing behind it. But kind of connecting in with some of the spiritual stuff. Like, so I'm assuming that like your guys' perspective on it is that all of this stuff has already existed. It's always been a thing, and it's just a matter of once you get to a certain point of being, I guess you could say like intellectually advanced or consciously advanced, then you're able to like access these planes in other places. So assumably that would be said for these, I guess, super terrestrials, whatever you want to try to call them, because if they're coming theoretically from here, they're not extraterrestrials, but assumably if these things are an old advanced race, as like your guys' theory kind of suggests, and that's kind of like the line of thinking that I've kind of fallen onto, considering like how many different like Native American origin stories, all of this talks about these people coming up out of the ground and, you know, basically giving them knowledge on how to do things. But is that kind of where you guys connect like the spiritual in with this stuff? Is that old race and they just kind of are able to do this stuff because they're just more advanced than we are as far as being conscious or aware of this stuff? Because assumably our teachings came from them.
Yeah, we as you probably know from the book, that we consider them to be our cousins, and that they were a breakaway humanoid or human race that broke away 12,850 years ago, because they knew that the comet was coming. There was a forewarning of about 1 to 2 years. And they told the people that weren't lucky enough to go subsurface, they said, you know, build an ark, go to high ground, or like in Derinkuyu in Turkey, to
dig under,
to build a 13-story deep,
shelter.
A shelter, right? Exactly. So it always starts the same way. There are 1,200 different, myths about this, but they're not really myths, because it's a shared.
Now we know they're not. Yeah.
At a certain point, you kind of have to look at it as, if enough people say it, there's got to be something to it.
and also too, there was also a genetic bottleneck that happened at that time too, where the surface dwellers were reduced to about 10,000 people. And we also know about the Uccello horizon that is there. It's about an inch thick. That's been found so far on 4 different continents in about 10 different countries, that showed that the forests of the northern hemisphere were all on fire at the same time.
Which makes sense in a comet impact, because comets are
dirty snowballs.
They're like dirty snowballs. Yeah, it's a snowball filled with giant chunks of rock, And when they enter our atmosphere, obviously the snow melts immediately, and they break apart into 40,000 mile an hour rocks coming through our atmosphere, causes these air bursts ahead of them. And we think that's what caught all the forests on fire at the same time and laid down this layer of charcoal called the Uccello horizon.
That's provable. And also too, all the myths end up the same way. After a period of time, either a god or gods or a pantheon of gods or whatever came back to the surface, because they're concerned that we were devolving back into cannibalism and barbarism.
Yeah,
and
the poor schmoes on the surface, the few survivors,
They basically re-educated us and taught us about animal husbandry and about metallurgy and different things like that. So all these things segue together. They all intersect. Like, obviously, if there was like foreknowledge and forewarning, which apparently there was, that means we were pretty darn advanced at the time.
I read like hundreds of these flood myths. Almost every single one of them starts with, and we were warned by God or an emissary of God or a disembodied voice that this was coming. And then not all of them, but a vast majority of them have some teacher at the end coming back to mankind.
The Viracochas.
Yeah, either Viracocha or Kukulkan, or the pantheon of Osiris and the Greek gods. They're always in pantheons of 12 over there.
Sumerians.
Yeah, the Babylonians and the Sumerians, and they each have their 12 gods with different names, and
they're all the same archetypes. So they're clearly the same characters, just with different perspectives depending on the culture.
Correct. Exactly.
I have a chart in the book that the Anunnaki are really hard to track in the Sumerian tablets, because they change their name every time they change their job or where they live.
So every single time I go to the museum, they have a bunch of depictions of the Anunnaki, and they call them, like, you'll go to one, it says like winged guardian. You go to the next one, it says like something about like one of the gods or something like that. It's weird. You never actually find the word Anunnaki when you go in like into a museum and you actually find this stuff. Like, but I found a perfect one where it was the bird-headed one holding the bag and everything, and it said winged god. I'm like, really?
And the thing the Sumerians would do is they used procession. What procession is like? We're just in the dawning of the age of Aquarius right now, right? It's this slow the Earth does this very, very slow wobble compared to the rest of the constellations in the sky. It takes like 26,000 years to go through a whole wobble of this what's called precession. And so the Sumerians used to use this for dating, and it's because you can use it to date, millennia. It's like
the time of Leo, like for instance, the Sphinx. 10,800 years ago.
So we think that that's what the Sumerians did. They would put their stamp on something based on using precession. So, for instance, we think the Giza Plateau was built by the Anunnaki in 10,000 years ago, and that was the time of Leo. And that's why there are sphinxes all over the Giza Plateau. There's like hundreds of these sphinx statues.
Right. A lot of people think, there's only one sphinx, but there's
a lot
many small sphinxes.
And so we think it was the way of marking the time of Leo, right? And that's been backed up by Robert Schoch, who did the water erosion patterns on the Sphinx work. Saying that it's at least this thing is at least 10,000 years old.
Yeah, and John Anthony West did that back in the 70s and the 80s.
Yeah, they worked together.
First,
Just to connect something else too, if people haven't connected the dots on it too, talking about the Anunnaki coming into Egypt, like just look at the Egyptian gods, like the way that they're drawn, the fact that they're so much bigger than everything else. Like they're literally depicted just like the Anunnaki. They look just like them. They're just calling them a different name. They have the animal heads with the human bodies. They're way bigger than everybody else. Like it's all there. Just people just want to look past it.
And the thing about the animal heads is, again, with the procession thing, is Enlil came to power in the time of Taurus. That's why he's always depicted as a half bull, But Enki was he came to
Pisces, right?
During the time of Pisces, and he's always depicted with fish around him or water flowing by with fish jumping out of it. And sometimes you'll see him as a half fish, half man.
And equated with Poseidon too, right?
But this is more of them just stamping their timestamp on when he was ascended as the king, as the
ruler, yeah.
At least that's my theory. And
that's what we have found, and it actually makes a lot of sense in ways.
So there's not really eagle-headed people. They're just putting, this person came to power during, I don't know, they have a different constellation setup than we do.
I mean, even theoretically too.
Phoenix or something.
I mean, these guys were definitely into like genetics and altering genetics and tampering with DNA and everything too. So I mean, even if they didn't always look like that, I mean, they could have altered their genetics to look like that during that time to also honor them. So kind of matching in with your theory and with a lot of what other people suggest as far as like what these beings were actually capable of as far as genetics go. I mean, I don't seem like it'd be out of the question for them to alter their genetics to give praise to something for the time being.
It could be that it was literally they physically changed somebody, because we think that they've done this with these cryptids that people are seeing, like the dog man and the moth guy and the moth boy,
the mantis.
And we think that these are results of their experimentations, where they make workers that they have no qualms about using genetic manipulation to create beings that maybe serve a specific function.
We 1958, a Russian doctor just decided, let's see if I can put a second head on a dog, right? And so for about 15 minutes, he had a two-headed dog that was alive, right? And just in 1958, we were screwing around with stuff like that. So,
wasn't that the same guy who was trying to impregnate a woman with like ape DNA too? I think that may have been the same doctor, because there was one guy that was like inseminating like a human female with ape DNA or with ape specimens, seeing if he could give birth to an ape thing.
I read that guy's experiments. He was trying to create a humanzee, they call it, right?
That's it.
Like
yep.
A chimpanzee and a human.
Yeah, different guy.
He wasn't trying to impregnate a woman. He was just trying to create the zygote to see if the DNA was compatible. But I don't think he was actually successfully impregnated.
Yeah, I never heard that it was successful, but I had heard, at least with the folklore based around this stuff, that he had actually at some point did try to inseminate a female and it just didn't take or work. But I mean, with a lot of this stuff, it seems like, especially the undercover top secret experiments. It's like there's what actually happened, and then there's all this muddying in the water that either comes from people trying to research it and throw ideas, or they purposely muddy the water to make it so it's harder to find what was actually going on in this weird scenario.
Right. It's the lie sandwich or the truth sandwich. They both work on most people. You hide a truth between two lies, or a lie between two truths.
Two pieces of truth.
But it's like, it's all disinformation. It really is. It's ridiculous.
I find a lot of the stuff that was like the Nazi experiments they were doing during World War II. As soon as we got into Cold War times, all of a sudden Russia was the one doing these things. And I mean, I'm sure that every government has their weird secret operations that they do, but I don't think it was to the extent that it was, because I think it was just they were recycling Nazi propaganda into the Cold War, and that's where the Russian sleep experiment and all this kind of stuff comes from. I don't think that a lot of this stuff actually happened, but they're just trying to scare people with propaganda.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing too, like with remote viewing and Luis Elizondo's book, Imminent, he devoted 6 pages to how he was taught how to remote view. It wasn't something that came to him naturally, but he knew about the program, and he literally was taught, and he got to be, according to him, fairly good at it. And the funny thing was, the side effect of that was that he and his wife would then become visited by, they call these orbs, like these red orbs.
They're getting orb activity at their house now.
Show up outside their house. Then, of course, they would have like the guys in unmarked cars that were like watching them, that kind of stuff. But the most interesting thing is that yes, and it's because if a person has developed what's called a parahippocampal gyrus, it's a part of the brain that passes over both hemispheres, bicameral. And if it's more developed, that's a signature for people that can either remote view or have ESP abilities or things such as that.
And in Elizondo's book, he said they did the government did MRIs
and PET
scans on the brains of abductees, and found that they had the same kind of brains as people with ESP or remote viewers. And this is something we've known for decades, that there's a psychic connection.
Yes.
And that they travel the astral realm. I think that they monitor people in the astral realm and communicate via that way too.
Different frequency. That's all it is.
Yeah.
And we can do it any time. It just has to do like right now we're on the computer, right? So our brain waves are going about 30 to 40 cycles per second. Well, you can't astral project at 40 cycles per second. But you can astral project at about 4 to 6 cycles per second, and that's in deep delta sleep. And you can do it somewhat too with doing Tai Chi, about 8 to 11 cycles per second. So moving meditation, or basically slowing down the brain waves, allows you to have the ability to be able to things like astral project and do things like remote viewing.
And I think UFOs kind of cruise the country at night, looking for people that they can pick up a psychic connection with.
Hey, babe.
Yeah, because I think because I've heard of this so many times. I've read so many reports of the same thing, where somebody's in their car or whatever, and they look up in the sky and they see a UFO, and they think to themselves, "Holy crap! There's a UFO up there!" And then the UFO stops and starts coming towards them, like it knows when it's been seen. It can. It can sense when somebody has seen it, and maybe they can only sense it when they have this particular affinity for that kind of brain. And so it's possible that they're kind of just trolling for.
They're picky.
Yeah, they're trying to find people who are psychic, and
they already know about me. So
yeah, they knew about Steve a long time ago. Yeah,
they keep on checking in on me.
Passed him by.
They keep on checking on me once in a while. They do.
Yeah,
it hasn't stopped for me.
Don't go anywhere, guys. We'll be right back. But just a quick reminder, if you'd like to rock some gear for one of your favorite podcasts, creatures, or topics, hop on over to the Open Minds Media store on Etsy and Printify for a wide range of designs with new drops regularly. The most recent design available is the SQUATCH Country Fear and Loathing parody design, with Sasquatch as Hunter S. Thompson and Mothman as Dr. Gonzo, with artwork by Chris Holm of the Conspire Theory podcast. Welcome back to the show. Now let's dive right in. I've heard from a few people that basically exactly what you were saying, but that when people actually have these abilities, they almost give off like a different light or like a different like frequency. So it's almost like they can spot them like a spotlight. So I've had a few people that have talked about having like astral travel experiences, and they'd be talking to like their spirit guides or these other like beings on the other side, and they'll basically like interject and be like, not these ones today, and then they'll just like leave. Like they're able to connect on this like astral plane. Like there's this whole other reality that's existing, and kind of connecting into some more sciencey stuff, because I know you guys with a lot of your theories are very science-based, connecting like where these things are coming from. For anybody that may not, kind of see the spiritual side of stuff as being scientific, I mean, I've made this point a million times that the government has spent so much money on doing this type of research. They wouldn't have wasted this much money on it if there wasn't something to it. And on top of that, it's like they're fully aware of the people that are able to do this stuff, because I know a good handful of people have mentioned on the show too that you'll try to like astral project to places that are like, the Pentagon, the Vatican, stuff like that. And there's actually like barriers around those places. So you can't even get into those in like the astral realm. So it's like there's definitely something to this stuff. And if people don't want to believe in the spiritual aspect of things, like my thing is that stuff always seems to be magic until we have more of an understanding of it, and then it becomes a science. And with like astrophysics, a lot of this stuff that's spiritual, if you actually read between the lines, it all connects. It's multiple realities layered on top of each other. And it's not that somebody's like going into this like crazy mental plane, but rather that they're tuning their antenna to be able to access this other plane that is simultaneously existing around us. And if you kind of look at it from that light, sounds a little bit less like woo-woo than like, somebody being able to like move their astral self in a dream. If you imagine that this plane exists as a second layer to the place that we're already existing at.
Yeah, what we try and do, as far as from our viewpoint, is to unveil the standpoint of like the magic aspect of things. It's technology and the ability that we have as human beings that are innate abilities that we have that seem to be magic. Like, for instance, magicians, it's called legerdemain or sleight of hand. Okay, there is actually a blind spot that we have in our eyes. Okay, is through the visual cortex, right? So there is actually a blind spot,
and the brain.
And so when they say the hand is quicker than the eye, magicians literally know about these blind spots and how to distract people. So a lot of what magic is just basically just knowing the weaknesses and the strengths. Okay, and also the same thing with communication. Let's say, for instance, you can listen to only like one station, like 97.1, right? That's the only station you ever listen to because that's the only experience you've had. But you learn by doing Tai Chi or whatever meditation, you learn to be able to tune into other stations. Okay, all right, maybe your friend or your brother or whatever can't listen to you, and they think, oh, well, you're just dreaming, or it's weird, or you're crazy, or whatever. But you can actually tune in, like Nikola Tesla, like some of the guys who made simultaneously. They created like Marconi and Tesla. They created the radio at the same time. There's a book out there that has 200 simultaneous, inventions, and it's like this information is being broadcast 24/7, 365,
but only on channels that some people can pick up.
And then if those people have the ability to do something with it, maybe 1,000 people saw how to build a radio, but only 2 people actually knew had the wherewithal.
Yeah, had the ability.
Exactly. So it's really interesting. Mm-hmm. It's really perception, and it's not this magic stuff.
I think that's they're broadcasting this on purpose to sort of as a way to uplift us spiritually and intellectually, because when I think of them, they're if they're telepathic like we believe. Telepathy is a human birthright, something that's atrophied in us, but it hasn't atrophied in them. And we think there's just a matter of keeping these practices up. And
right.
If you're astral projecting, if you're in the astral realm, if you're doing, if you're telepathic, it's because you vibrated the upper chakras, and the chances are pretty good that you're not going to be a violent person. So we think that they're in some ways they're more evolved than we are spiritually as well as
and
technologically.
they don't understand us, and they don't really like us because they're actually afraid of us.
They think of us as barbarians,
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, they started popping up once we started splitting atoms. And I mean, everybody always wonders what their connection is to nuclear. And I think it's a matter of like, when you start splicing and splitting particles, you're not just affecting this reality, you're affecting other realities that are existing within the same plane, because that shatter is hitting every other reality that's in that same spot. So the only reason they're concerned now that we have nuclear is because now we're messing with their reality.
And if they like, we believe if they actually live here with us sharing the planet, if we blow up the planet, we kill them too. So they have skin in this game, they have they're well motivated to try and keep us from blowing up the world.
Yeah, and the other thing too for your audience, like a lot of even till this day, a lot of science is based on Newtonian physics, which is the macrocosm. Like if this drops, it has this effect, right? But really, what we're talking about is more like you're looking more like Stephen Hawking or Einstein for sure, as far as the microcosm, as far as like the subatomic particles, as far as like we're trying to figure out, even just like we don't even know what dark matter or dark energy is. It's all theory, okay? But as far as what really happens, as far as the way we really communicate and exist, really happens more on the subatomic level. The macrocosmic stuff is what we can see, feel, and touch just on a daily basis. That's Newtonian, and most people still buy into like the Newtonian. But it's not really where consciousness is. It's not there. It's the subatomic.
I mean, just to kind of bring stuff into like another perspective of viewing things, I've been diving into a lot of these like really, really subtle concepts that they introduced through Star Trek. And anybody that follows Star Trek knows like this guy, the guy who wrote it, like was clearly in and knew some things that he wasn't necessarily supposed to know. But a regular concept, it seems to be in that show that I keep bringing up lately, is they talk about beings that they get to a point of being evolved where they basically don't have a physical self anymore, and they become like an energetic body. And with that energetic body, they can inhabit things that are physical, but for the most part, they exist within that atomic version of themselves. Like it's an extension of like telepathy, all of that kind of stuff. So, I mean, a lot of people talk about this whole concept that the Greys and a lot of these different alien beings seem to almost be like drone-like. So I've been kind of wondering if they exist within this other plane as their energy for versions of themselves, but their way of being able to interact in this reality is that they created these like biological vessels that they're basically able to inhabit so that they can do what they need to do like in the physical world. But kind of entertaining your guys' theory that they exist within the same plane as us, but they also exist primarily in this other realm because they are something that's been here for so long that they've evolved past the physical form, and now they can transverse where they exist as this energy form, but they can also create this other form that they can use when they want to become physical for, anything that they're trying to do within the physical realm.
Well, I don't want to, step on anyone else's theories and call them bunk or anything, because who knows, right? Maybe that is the case.
It sounds a little far-fetched.
But it seems to us, that's certainly not our theory. We're a lot more nuts and bolts than that. We think that to escape the cataclysm that was the Younger Dryas comet impact, we think a lot of humanity went underground, and some of them stayed underground the whole time, right? And we think that maybe the Nordics discovered the Greys at some point and utilized their DNA to create these they're kind of like living robots, as a worker race. We think that they used to use us as slaves. Certainly the Anunnaki story is that we were their slaves. But humans don't make good slaves. We tend to chafe under the yoke, a lot too much free will, and
I think we're supposed to be the jack of all trades, but because we're a jack of all trades, we just became too self-conscious of ourselves.
I think so.
Did you want to hear a story about Gene Roddenberry? Because you're talking about Gene Roddenberry in Star Trek, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
This goes to my true story. Okay, my uncle and my aunt, they used to have this house on Beverly Glen up in Beverly Hills, right? This had this beautiful view. Okay, so anyways, he he golfed with, Shatner and Nimoy. He was a golfer and whatever. He was a pilot. He was, he entertained, right? So anyways, he told me the story when, this was during the time of Star Trek, right? The original series where, when Gene Roddenberry was married to, the Nurse Chapel. I forget her name.
Yeah, she plays Lelwixana Troy.
Yeah, right. So, anyways, they were married, right? And so he was throwing a party at his house, my uncle, and Gene Roddenberry was bitching and moaning about Hollywood and how all the things they're trying to like stop him from doing, like with Spock, and he got really drunk. And my uncle actually literally had to say, "No, Gene, you got to go now. You're getting too hostile." He actually threw Gene Roddenberry out of his house in like 1968.
Well, originally, I mean, they made the original episodes of Star Trek with Captain Pike, and they said it was too cerebral, so they didn't like it, so they threw it off to the side. And I'm sure he was like, "All right, fuck you! Like, I made this too intelligent for you."
I got a story about that. Actually, Leslie and I both met
his wife,
Dusty. What was her? I forget. We actually met his widow back in like the late 90s, whatever. We were like doing some business, whatever. But yeah, we actually met his ex-wife, and she was one saying, no, you can't do a television series. No, you're a movie actor. You're working with John Wayne. No, don't do this series. So she basically Dusty Hunter, that was her name, right? And actually, the actor actually ended up drinking himself to death, died from liver failure because he just he was stressed, I guess.
Poor guy. Yeah, I thought it was sad the way they kicked him off and used Shatner. And Shatner, I thought he was great. I loved him as Captain Kirk, except for when he sold out the ship for a piece of ass now and then.
Every time.
Yeah, every time.
Not every single time.
Most of the time, yeah.
More than once, though, that's for sure.
But I mean, kind of connecting stuff with what we're talking about today, a little bit in Star Trek. Do you think that maybe this guy was like experiencing premonitions? I know a lot of people link it in with that. Like he was aware of information in some way, somehow. Like he was talking about like Space Warden before anybody was talking about it. He was talking about just all these concepts that just seemed like they were intended to be like just trickling the pieces for people so that they could be entertained or they could have these concepts being entertained to them in a different way than what they would think about as being like literal. But yeah, do you think this guy like had premonitions? Like, what do you think?
Okay, what I read about Roddenberry, because I did some research on the guy, and in the 50s, he was trying to be like a spy novelist or like a detective novelist. He's writing like short stories and all that. But he knew Nimoy and he knew DeForest Kelley, but apparently he had some connection too with one or a few of the guys that were involved with Majestic 12. And as the story goes, that he got some of his ideas from apparently like from some of the stuff that we already knew.
Real UFO information.
That we were trying to either reverse engineer or we actually knew.
Yeah.
And so that where he came up with some of his ideas. Like look at the that very famous one where the cage, the very first one, right? Where the aliens were really like women, but they have these huge heads, right? And
looked a little bit like Grays, didn't
it? A little bit like Grays, right? It's like, where did he come up with that? But it's interesting because apparently there was a real connection between government officials and Majestic 12 and Gene Roddenberry.
But the whole Star Trek concept, we loved it. We grew up on it, right?
Of course, yeah.
But we don't think that's what's happening. We don't think that there's a federation and the Greys are from Arcturus.
Muddy in the water, like we were talking about earlier. You're trying to trickle some good stuff in there, and then you muddy the waters with the rest of it. It's just predictive programming. That was the word I was trying to look for earlier.
Sandwich, right.
And so, but they keep saying that this is what's going on. Like this one, Linda Moulton Howe is like the
queen,
the first lady of the ufology world, right? And so if you want to leak something, either true or untrue, to the ufology community overall, if you leak it to her, because she'll disseminate it. And this one guy took her out on a boat and told her this whole story about how we're really in a federation, and one of the ships is named after an MJ-12 guy, Forrestal.
Two of the ships.
Yeah, like the aliens would name their ships after two MJ-12 guys from,
These are
back in the day.
interstellar ships. There's 4 of them, and we're basically hitchhiking, and
Yeah.
2 of them are named after the 2 of the first guys that were in MJ-12.
And the whites come from the Pleiades. And this guys come from Arcturus. And
from Piscine 4, and it's like,
So
really,
this is the new lie that they're putting out because, it's just what we want to hear. It has too much of what I call a what we want to hearism about it. We'd love the Star Trek to be real.
Yeah.
So they're feeding it to us, and and we think it's just, we think for thousands of years these beings played God to us because it was easy to control us that way, right? But now we're too sophisticated for that lie to work. Now I think they're playing space aliens. They're trying to keep us looking up at the skies rather than checking out underneath our feet.
It's total misdirection. Total misdirection. They say, okay, wave the hand here while the other hand's doing this down here. It's total misdirection.
So
it just makes complete sense if you actually open your brain and just look at what is actually happening.
I mean, theoretically too, it might partially be like predictive programming that they like entertain these different types of shows. They say like, oh, well, we're going to have this diplomacy in space. It's going to be fun. You're going to go around. You're going to see all these different planets. You're going to interact with these fun races. So it's just supposed to maybe be something where that's like placed where they've made it look like it's fun to do all this kind of stuff. And they don't take into consideration like the stuff they like to portray in like Alien, for example, where they're like, all right, 6 months until we reach the next planet. And you're just trapped in space in vast black darkness for like 6 months straight, depending on what your perspective is of space. But I think it's like tricking people into being interested in doing this stuff in the future and trying not to make it look scary. Like, don't go to space. Like, because they want to be able to just blast people off and say like, all right, let's see what we can do.
And the realism about actually transplanting a person to another planet where they have no defenses, no natural defenses for any of the microbes or bacterium or viruses there. You'd last 5 minutes on the planet, probably.
Leslie, you brought that right up. I wanted to tell your audience about like a book called Symbiotic Planet. It actually won like a Pulitzer Prize, and it's written by Lynn Margolis, and it's not a sci-fi. It's actually written by a doctor and a scientist that specializes in seaweed and kelp.
Seaweed is a lot more interesting than people realize.
And when you find out about it, and I found out about this from one of our friends that was becoming an oceanographer at the time, and says, like, she read our book, right? Said, you should really read this, because when it gets down to it from the basic level, any type of entity coming from a different planet would immediately, their immune systems would be attacked.
They're full-on attack.
By a full-on attack, because they did not grow up on the planet.
Kind of the War of the Worlds scenario where, the Martians come here and they only last like a week before they die out from...
it was the water in that one. And I mean, there's a lot of people that think that like why am I always brain farting on this? H.G. Wells? Yes, H.G. Wells was aware of information that he shouldn't be aware of, because I had somebody else break it down that in War of the Worlds he was talking about these like projected energy weapons, and the way that he describes them is how they would physically work versus like the ray guns that everybody started using in sci-fi later on, that it was just projected like energy bursts that had no visual representation of it, just boom, hits.
And his stories about going to the center of the earth, down into the crust, and there's civilizations down there, he was kind of ahead of his time.
Even the eugenesis stuff. I mean, I just listened to the audiobook the other day for the Island of Dr. Moreau, and it's like the stuff they were talking about in that also seems like it's like, all right, because he was talking about this whole idea about you don't turn animals into humans by, taking them and putting them into another vessel. It's a matter of like using like plastic surgery to like manipulate the flesh into whatever shape that you want it to be. Like the concepts he talked about in that seemed like it's like way different than anybody else that was describing that type of stuff at the time. Because anybody else that was running stuff at that time would have been like, all right, they took the animal brain and put it in a human body, and that was the end of it. Like totally different perspective on this stuff.
Yeah.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back. But before we get into this break, if you might be interested in joining a growing community of like-minded individuals, then pop on over to the Open Minds Media Telegram, a place to discuss high strangeness, conspiracies, and anything else on your mind. Bizarre and open-minded individuals always welcome. Link to join available down in the show description. And we are back, so let's get back to it.
Robert Louis Stevenson, he wrote, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, right? Well, he was trying to come up with a story, right? So the story is that he was just at his wit's end. He couldn't come up with a story. Then he fell asleep, and then he had this dream, and he dreamt the whole story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and he wrote it down from a dream. It's like from the standpoint of like I say, it's the Akashic records.
More
this
Akashic
information.
record, yeah.
Nikola Tesla, he came up with alternating current, which allows us to be doing what we're doing right now. Alternating current. He came up with it while he was daydreaming, like walking in a park.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's like this stuff is true. It's real.
It's a matter of tapping into it and who's going to do something with it, which I say this to people all the time. Like, if you have an idea that pops into your head, if you don't do something with it, it's going to pass on to the next person. Like, there's a reason why it came to you first. And if you don't take that opportunity, it's going to go to the next one because that information is going to get out in some way, shape, or form. Even if it's just a story, like, it's something that needs to be in the human consciousness if you have this push that's like, create this.
Well, it's like Steven said, maybe 1,000 people pick up on the same information, but only 2 out of those 1,000 knew how to actually construct something
that have a
like
science
that. Yeah.
background, whatever, that actually know what it means. But
Yeah.
you could have an Aborigine get the same thing.
The same message, but not understand it.
What the hell? They don't have the resources. But yeah,
I mean,
it's being broadcast all the time.
Look at any philosophical concept too. I mean, if that gets projected to the human race, think about how many different ways, like in media, that somebody will like kind of project the same idea, but they all come at it in totally different ways. Because when it comes to philosophy, it's like a matter of perspective. So it's like, you may have this thing about raising raising vibration, elevation with everybody, and it'll come to an artist where they start doing these like really beautiful like DMT looking paintings. Then it'll come to somebody who does like like movies and stuff like that, and they'll make these like really, really deep movies that really make you think. And it's like they're not the same form of media by any means, but they're all inspired by the same source, and it is portraying the same message in like 30 different ways. And I mean, you'll even see that with electronics, like you were saying, or like technology, like even the Transformers, like then you have Autobots, like all these ideas came to people at the same time, and it was a matter of perspective on how people tried to create these things because it was needed to be in the human consciousness for some reason.
Exactly. It's both exciting and scary.
Exactly, because it's like, what's the meaning for it?
Yeah, we can develop, atomic bombs, and we can also develop beautiful art. Okay, we can develop beautiful music, and we can also develop,
a plague.
Yeah, plague, exactly.
Let's make a new plague.
Let's make a new plague. It's like, so yeah. We are basically bipolar. I think human beings are basically by nature, we're kind of bipolar.
Maybe a little bit, yeah.
It's like, we have the good, we have all the 7 deadly sins, and where did we inherit that from? Where did we inherit our lust for gold? Where do we inherit our ability to be able to enslave our fellow man? We're really good at all that stuff. We're great at making weapons too. We excel at that, and we basically love our weapons.
See, I think it's a matter of there's always going to be this law of duality that exists in the universe. And it seems like with a lot of races, I mean, there's kind of like the mix where people have these good experiences, bad experience. It might be a matter of perspective, but I feel like in order for there to be good, there also has to be evil. And maybe if a race hasn't expanded into the broader aspect of the universe, then you'll see more of this like within that same race. But I kind of wonder if it's a matter of like when you get brought into the wider universe and your full race becomes aware of all these other existing things, if it's almost like this crossroads that your race can either go into the law of duality of becoming the good side or becoming the bad side, but because you have something else to balance that out at that point, it now gives you that option. Because if you're only stuck by yourself, in order for there to be good, there has to be bad. In order for there to be growth, there has to be struggle. But once you've expanded into there being more other races that can almost fill that void, I wonder if that's kind of where you need to be in order for a race to be completely good or completely bad and be able to just kind of push into where they need to be in order to fit that law of duality. Because it seems like that concept always occurs, that for everything good that happens, something negative always is going to happen.
It's kind of our opinion. It's kind of our opinion that it'd be like trying to divorce yin from yang. Some people say it's all yin and yang, like when I was in acupuncture college or whatever. But yin and yang are not necessarily evil or good. They're not evil or good. Yin is not evil, yang is not good. They're part of like this simplistic duality that helps us
Yeah.
to understand our reality. It's really a simplistic way of like trying to understand what these things are going. Like for instance, Homo erectus, that we believe that we were uplifted from Homo erectus into Homo sapien and then Homo sapien sapien. Well, Homo erectus did not have the neocortex, didn't have certain areas of the brain that, for instance, that control anger and fear.
And
They had
the speech
different.
centers.
Yeah,
and,
right. So
and
there's
imagination.
right. So when you get more, more developed, or more, let's say, more intellectual, more developed, other things come along with it too. More anxieties come along with it, more intelligence, more fear of like, well, if I lose this, what will happen there? And probably more love too.
And
But
the tablets, they tell the story of how they uplifted us, right? And I would have thought, well, that's what a lovely myth that is, right? Except that there actually seems to be some genetic proof that we were uplifted. In the Broca's brain, in the genome, it shows a cut and paste job, like a CRISPR edit on our genome.
yeah, Carl Sagan wrote the book called Broca's Brain. Yeah.
And Jason Martell is doing a lot of work on this, researching whether this, because if that's true and we were uplifted, then we couldn't have uplifted ourselves, right? It had to be somebody else who came along and uplifted us,
Right.
And then one other thing I wanted to leave you before we leave for the show tonight was the hair of the alien. I don't know if we remembered to talk about it last time, but there's this little kernel of evidence that backs up our theories. This guy in Australia, he was essentially raped while he was paralyzed by these two women, one of whom looked like he thought like an alien hybrid. Her eyes were too large, and she had white hair and kind of a pointy chin and pointy cheekbones. And the next morning he woke up and found two of her hairs in bed with him. And he got these hairs tested. And first of all, they're like no human type ever seen before, because they're perfectly clear, like fishing line.
Or like a polar bear hair?
Yeah, like completely clear. And then, so it's not a human type that way. But then when it tests genetically, it's human. It's a bizarre mixture, though. It's Gaelic and Basque and part Chinese, Mongolian part of China.
1%.
Yeah, just a tiny percentage of their population. So this DNA was this bizarre mix, but it's human DNA. It's mutated human DNA because it's mutated to be perfectly clear. So that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with humans that have slightly mutated, and there's the genetic proof all in one hair.
Two hairs, actually.
And the two hairs.
And I mean, that seems to be a common trope with a lot of stuff. I mean, obviously you wouldn't be able to test a gray, unfortunately, but I'm sure you'd probably end up with the same results. But I mean, even, diving into Sasquatch, it's like when they test that, there's the unknown side of the DNA, but then there's also the female side that's human DNA. So, I mean, I definitely think that there was some form of genetic splicing at some point.
Yes, we think so too.
In this planet's history.
Too.
Because there's two possible progenitors for the other side. It's at the time, 300,000 years ago, there was Australopithecus robustus
and
Gigantopithecus, and we think that they took, half of the genome from one of those two creatures, and half the genome maybe from humans.
And we know they're telepathic too. So it's also like another quick thing too. Telepathy is much simpler than language. I mean, not that I'm completely telepathic at all, but it's a much easier way of communicating. A written language is like 5 or 6 steps away from being able to
just think it to each other.
That's why these supposed gray aliens, which are not the grays, they don't need to learn 7 or 10,000 different languages. They just communicate via telepathy.
Yep.
So it's just much simpler.
I mean, you guys connecting with a lot of biblical stuff, so I'll leave you with this one too before we end up wrapping everything up. So the whole Tower of Babel concept, I've suggested this a few times on the show, that I don't think it was a matter of languages being split. I think that people were all inherently telepathic, and something happened where they said, all right, we need to stop them from being able to communicate so easily. And I mean, a lot of people kind of view that from like the biblical perspective, but it would completely make sense if we were starting to get on to something that genetically created us. If they said, oh no, they're all starting to gang up on us, what do? You completely try to split them up so that they have to try to figure out and reassess how to do things. So I think the Tower of Babel was the fact that we were all telepathic and something stopped us all from being telepathic, and then we had to figure out language at that point.
100%.
Interesting.
100%.
Well, Sitchin had a take on it. There's a Sumerian Tower of Babel story. That predates the biblical version by thousands of years, right? And of course, the gods in that one are Anunnaki gods. And what the humans were reaching for, what they were doing was building a launch tower, and Enlil got, the Anunnaki got angry with the humans because they were trying to reach for the same power that the gods had, the power of, rocketry and flying ships, and so that they had to squash them down for that. It's actually, the Sitchin goes over it. I think it's in his first book, the 12th Planet. Yeah. Really fascinating take on it too.
So that definitely connects in to kind of what I was suggesting too, and I didn't even know that there was another connection beyond that. So I'm gonna have to do some research into that one myself. Stay tuned, guys. This is our last break, but if you guys enjoyed the show and think I deserve it, please leave a review or rating for the show on iTunes or Spotify. Your continued support is what makes this show possible, and your opinions go a long way to help the show grow and improve. So thank you. Now back with that deep conversation you crave.
So did you want us to leave you with some words of wisdom?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, I've got one for you. I've been thinking about it from the very beginning.
Go for it.
Okay. When the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Yeah, that we keep finding that to be true again and again.
Yep,
True.
I found it through my whole life.
That is very true. Everything lines up and is supposed to happen how it's supposed to.
Read our book. That would be very wise of you people out
Buy
there.
our book.
And watch the documentary now. You got to throw that one in there too.
And the documentary, of course.
On reading, you can get most of our theory in a 54
Who they
minute.
are. It's on,
YouTube. It's easy to find.
Yeah,
on YouTube.
you got to do the capital W though to get to it. If you do the lowercase, it will take you to a different one. But who they are.
Well, I guess that kind of leads into the next spot then. If anybody wanted to come and find you on social media, you already told them how to find your documentary. If they want to pick up a copy of your book, any of that stuff, even possibly contact you guys, how would everybody come and find you when you guys work on the internet?
Also the show.
Yes, the book is available on Amazon and Ingram. Our new show is at gnostictv.com. And again, that was Abductions 101, UFOs and the Paranormal Connection. And we're on Instagram. If you want to reach out to us, reach out on Instagram, DM me there. And we're at leslie.shaw.author. And we're on Facebook there as well, at the same handle. And Stephen has some of his music posted there.
Yeah,
so
my original
enjoy.
Music.
Yeah,
I channel music instead of like doing the automatic. So.
I'll definitely have to go and check that out myself also. And of course, I'll include all those links down in the show description so everybody can find it quick and easy. And I appreciate you guys making time to come back on today. It's always nice to chat with you guys.
Thanks. I forgot to, we're going to make a merch store on our website at whotheyarebook.com.
And that should be able to link in with everything else for the links I'm going to have down in the show description too, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So even if it isn't necessarily up and set up yet, yep, you guys should hopefully be able to, if you listen to this episode later on, be able to go back and check out that merch store.
Okay, great.
Soon, yeah. I'm getting it together just in time to not be ready for Christmas.
And if you guys happen to get an updated link for it, anything like that, I can always go back on this episode and update it. So if anybody's listening to this later on, that link should be down in the show description for you guys.
Thank you so much.
Cool.
Absolutely.
Right.
And thanks for having us.
Anytime. Always a pleasure talking to you guys. I enjoy your theories. I enjoy the way that you guys do your research. And it's always an interesting conversation when I have you guys on.
Thank you, my dear.
You're a good host.
If you enjoyed today's episode and want to show some love for the show, don't forget to smash that follow icon, or you guys can even share this episode or the whole show with a friend through word of mouth. Of course, an awesome way to help the show grow through grassroots. And if anyone would like to get in touch with me for any reason whatsoever, you guys can do so through the email, which is increaseofallrealitypodcast@outlook.com, or through social media. Instagram and Facebook are the ones that I'm the most active on. Or you guys can also get a hold of me through the submission form, which is available on the link tree, of course. Or you guys can even call into the hotline, text the hotline if you guys want to, leave a voicemail, whatever you guys want to do. And that number is 313-364-1551. And if you guys have some free time, don't forget to check out some of the awesome friends of the show. I Know SQUATCH, Snarly Out Natural Products, Cryptotheology, and Big Ape Threads. And our other friends with affiliate links, Dimension Devices, Oregon-ite, and Sticker Mule, with additional discounts and credits available. And more info on that, of course, is available down in the show description. And every single thing that I mentioned throughout the show today is all available on the link tree, which is available down in that show description also. And with that, I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. I hope today's show has connected some dots in your own reality. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Have a good night, everybody.
Reality isn't what it seems. I'm Dr. D's taking aboard a craft with a tractor beam. Is life a simulation or an astral dream? Aliens travel through black holes in different galaxies. Life is a bizarre odyssey, with a mic talking about philosophy. Well, Bigfoot is stalking campers as a Wendigo walks through the woods of sharpened antlers, using a Ouija board to talk to the dead like a necromancer. There's so many questions and not enough answers. So if you're interested in mysteries and abnormalities, tune in and listen to Inquiries of Our Reality. So if you're interested